All right, so today we're going over Hereditary, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It deals with demon possession and repression. So if you haven't seen the movie, this is all you need to know. Annie is the main character, Ellen is her mother that just passed away, and Charlie is her daughter, and Peter is her son. So let's get into
And Steve's her
Hereditary.
husband?
Yes, Steve's her husband.
Hereditary centers around artist Annie Graham, who is sort of in mourning over the death of her estranged mother. Before she can even process that loss, though, her daughter Charlie is killed in a freak car accident while her son is at the wheel.
This is the craziest scene I've ever seen in a scary movie. So if you haven't seen the movie, spoilers, but this is how the movie starts. So her son goes to a party, takes her younger sister. She eats something, gets an allergic reaction, and she's choking. And he starts panicking. He takes her from the party, starts driving her home. She sticks her head out the window because she's panicking. And she gets beheaded in this scene from hitting her head on this light pole. Yeah. So this is how the movie starts.
As Annie's whole world subsequently crumbles,
So her mom just passed away, Ellen, and now her daughter Charlie. Just
mysterious woman teaches her to perform a seance that channels Charlie's spirit. And that's where everything goes a little, off the rails. Eventually, we learn that Annie's dead mom was part of a totally bananas pagan cult that is looking for a vessel for its favorite demon. By the end, pretty much everyone is beheadedly worshipping Charlie's spirit, which has been planted into Peter's body.
ugh. So okay, so I know that was a lot, but basically what happened was there was a seance that someone performed after Charlie, her daughter, died by putting Charlie's spirit into their son Peter, her brother Peter, and he's getting all of these weird, having these weird reactions to it.
So, why is it so scary? Well, partially because it contains stuff like this. But horror films that really shake us tend to anchor even their most supernatural scares in our real-life fears. In Hereditary's case, the clue is in the name. It's the story of a family doomed to misery by their lineage. While most of us probably don't have to worry about our grandmothers being secret occultists, the idea that we might suffer for our parents' sins is pretty universal. And that universality has everything to do with Hereditary's scare factor.
Yeah.
See, some of the most unhinged events of the film can be explained by the concept of repression, one of the cornerstones of Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Repression is the process by which the conscious mind is shielded from feelings and thoughts which are too painful to acknowledge. These buried emotions are left to fester unresolved and often manifest themselves in occasionally alarming ways. Like, this. Indeed, Annie...
So basically repression is like not dealing with your emotions in like a healthy way, or just like straight up denying it, or like pushing, like you're not even like acknowledging them.
Well, yeah, but I think that also it comes from so far because she had traumatic childhood stuff that if she brings up, then it's like, oh, she has to unravel so much.
Right. I'm just trying to define like repression.
Oh, yeah, repressing those memories.
Repressing those memories,
or, yeah, so that you don't process the emotions. So then now that she's dead, the mother's dead, she can't grieve it either.
Right. Yeah, she doesn't know how to deal with her mother
it just
dying.
Stacks and stacks.
Yeah, or maybe even her daughter dying.
Yeah, because she has no time for any of it now. Or it's
case study in repression. Her life has been littered with tragedies that she is unable to fully confront.
Yeah,
in
Annie,
her eulogy
the
for
main
her
character.
mother, Annie tries to find nice words to say, but inadvertently ends up stressing how emotionally unavailable and controlling she was.
My mother was a very secretive and private woman. She had private rituals, private friends, private anxieties.
Annie's true feelings bubble beneath the surface, too repressed to be articulated, and too powerful to be let go. This is pretty blatant foreshadowing. Annie doesn't know how sinister her mother's private rituals were, or that the strange faces she sees in the pews are actually members of Ellen's cult. Right from the beginning, the things that the Graham family hides are sowing the seeds of their own destruction.
Yeah.
Annie's repression makes honest communication with those closest to her difficult, if not impossible.
If it gets too cold, come back in.
Just need to sleep.
The only place she'll talk about her traumatic past is at a grief support group full of strangers. Even then, she's completely detached, reeling off the laundry list of horrifying things that occurred during her childhood in an almost casual way.
She didn't have an easy life. She had DID, which became extreme at the end, and dementia. My older brother had schizophrenia. And when he was 16, he hanged himself in my mother's bedroom. And of course, his suicide note blamed her, accusing her of putting people inside him. So that was my mom's life.
It's notable that Annie finishes this speech by distancing herself from the narrative. These are her mother's traumas, not hers.
That's interesting because I think oftentimes we think of repression as like you don't even remember the memories, but then repression could also be you have the memories, but then you don't identify, like you distance yourself from them, so you don't think they affect you, and that's another way of not dealing with those emotions, I guess, is just by denying that they affect you at all, which is I think like what's happening in the scene.
When acknowledging her family's history, she's unwilling to accept it as part of her story. Annie's not unique in her inability to deal with tragedy. During what Freud calls the first use of the psychoanalytic approach, the patient, Anna O, was encouraged to make poetical
I don't know a lot
compositions
of
that
real
could offer...
psychotherapists that use Sigmund Freud, though.
Yeah,
He's
this is
been
just
very,
right.
like, a lot of his stuff is like, you can't prove it. It's not a, or, yeah.
Right,
so-
this is just their interpretation of a movie.
relief from her chronic anxiety, using art to express what she couldn't say out loud. Fittingly, Annie's art functions in the same way. She makes miniature doll houses that recreate her traumatic life events. However, it's not accurate to call Annie's creepy model home therapeutic. Freud emphasized that it's not enough to artistically depict traumatic events. The patient also has to engage with the emotions attached. Even as Annie recreates her past traumas in minute detail, she refuses to acknowledge the emotional payload they carry, something which becomes ghoulishly clear after she creates a bleak depiction of Charlie's death and Peter's role in it.
So she made a diorama. I mean, that's her art, but then she also made a diorama of her daughter's beheading. Oh my God, it's crazy.
About him?
Oh, no?
No, it's a neutral view of the accident.
But Annie's strange behavior is ultimately understandable. She's coping with her trauma all on her own. When tragedy strikes, we hope to lean on the people around us for support, often relying on a stable familial structure to hold us together. However, many modern familial units are really not set up to deal with such severe emotions. In fact, many aren't really set up to deal with emotions at all.
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother!
And that brings us to what really makes Hereditary so scary. Repressed people tend to form family units that are also repressive, i.e. the Grahams. Annie and her husband, Steve, lie to one another rather than dealing with upsetting emotions. She hides the fact that she is going to a grief support group, and he hides the fact that her mother's grave has been desecrated. This chronic inability to communicate soon comes back to haunt them.
What was it?
Just some billing crap.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go see a movie.
The perpetual secrecy that hangs over their relationship leads to mistrust and even paranoia, as when Steve accuses Annie herself of being responsible for desecrating the grave.
You dug up the grave.
Hey, look at the bugs.
She
Yeah.
wasn't. What? All those nights you were pretending to go to the movies.
Here,
So I think what they're saying here is that like because these characters are innately repressed, it leads to like these communication dysfunctions that causes them to ultimately like turn on each other because they're just not communicating at all.
Well, also, they're getting all paranoid.
Yes.
There's stuff that's happening that's making them really paranoid.
Yeah, and the fact that they can't like communicate. Well, I think this video will get into it later, but the fact that they can't like communicate that they're paranoid makes them even more paranoid.
Yeah.
here, the
They
staggeringly
need
toxic
help
results
from a counselor, a professional.
That's the moral of the movie. Get counseling.
of family-wide repression become abundantly clear. And the same is true for the Grahams' children. After the grandmother's funeral, Annie and Steve try to prompt Charlie and Peter to open up about their feelings, to no avail. Not surprising given their parents' reluctance to honestly voice their own emotions. Charlie is repressed to the point where she barely talks, responding to emotional stimuli with a strange and truly terrifying clicking noise instead. She is particularly unable to express anything negative or confrontational. When forced into an argument, she simply concedes,
"That's okay."
and we learned that her practice of suppressing emotions started very early.
You never cried as a baby. You know that?
Peter, on the other hand,
I don't know
buries
if
his
that's suppressing emotions or just not
Yeah,
being
some babies.
emotional.
Yeah, some babies just don't cry that much.
Babies, I don't think, feel like emotions like that at the get-go.
I think they're just painting a scene that everyone
Not
deals
they,
with
she.
repression.
She's the one interpreting it.
Sure,
this way.
everyone. Yeah, right. Every character is dealing with repression in a different way. Like she's gonna talk about Peter, how he smokes weed all the
But
time.
do they call it repression?
No,
the
I don't know.
movie?
No, this is just their interpretation of it. But I thought this was an
Her
interesting
interpretation. Who's
take
they?
on the movie. Wisecrack.
Oh.
Under a cloud of marijuana smoke, numbly sleepwalking through much of the day. His parents do the same, popping prescription pills to blank out their own feelings. So, what happens when you make 4 deeply repressed people share a home? Stuff like this.
This movie is like terrifying because
we
it
know
has
lots of repressed people, and we don't see them hallucinate like that.
right. Yeah, the imagery of this movie is just so terrifying, but also the story is really scary as well.
Are completely cut off from one another emotionally, compartmentalized into
I'm
separate
like,
rooms,
typical
as
Asian
if
families
they
are
wanted-
repressed emotionally. You don't see them hallucinating and having
Yeah, but you don't see. I mean, they
crazy issues.
They
like
had 2
this.
tragedies back to back. Like who knows? Like it would drive any family crazy.
But also, I think there's some people who don't express their emotions, but it doesn't make her crazy because she expresses them, or it comes out in a different way, the thing she's processing.
Right, but then there's also, this movie also deals with elements of like demon possession and mental illness, and so
Yeah.
it's more than just repression.
These miniatures. Even in the wake of Ellen's death, the family is more concerned with how they are supposed to feel than how they actually feel.
Should I be sadder?
It's like a psychopath.
No, but that's the thing. Like, she keeps questioning herself because, like, ever since I was a child, I never reacted appropriately.
Yeah.
So it's like, should I be? Should I start crying now? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
it's like, well, just do however you need to grieve. Like, however you need to get over this. But talk to someone.
It'll come.
As a result, the Grahams are totally unequipped to deal with Charlie's death, which is made gallingly clear by Peter's decision to cocoon himself in bed, leaving his parents to discover her body.
Okay, so what happens
Yeah, the
is
vast majority of people are not ready for a child's sudden death. Or anyone's sudden
the
death.
scene where he's driving and Charlie,
she
his
loses her
brother,
head.
his sister loses her head. He just keeps driving, and he
Yeah, what
drives
else are you gonna
all the way
do?
home,
You
and he
know
gets
what
into
happened.
bed. Right, he gets into bed, and like the sun comes up. He didn't get a wink of sleep, and the parents find the daughter, and that's the scene that's happening now.
He is so unable to process the trauma and his role in it that he simply shuts down. But the Grahams were emotionally unhealthy even before the tragedy. In its wake, they are unable to reckon with the pain or even ask for help. In the rare moments when the Grahams do talk about their feelings, it gets ugly fast. In one exchange, Annie projects many of her own problems onto Peter while refusing to recognize
That's why having
them.
a third party is always best.
Right. But-
Counselor.
So they're explaining that Annie projects onto him.
Even at this explosive moment, she continues to repress her feelings, specifically her guilt about Charlie's death.
Maybe what
can't
she's feeling is anger.
And I can't forgive because nobody admits anything they've done!
What about you, Mom? She didn't want to go to the party. So why was she there?
But Annie's
I mean, they're pointing out that the repression leads to anger. Like she can't accept what she's done, and so she's blaming it on him, and he's saying the same thing back to her.
Well, I know, but she can still feel angry about the whole everything happening. Like, it's okay to feel angry about it. She
get in touch with her feelings isn't some kind of moral failing. It was somewhat inevitable. Their grandmother ultimately dooms them, but not just because of her pagan machinations. Rather, her most potent legacy is her emotional detachment, which continues to drive her family apart even after she's gone. In this sense, the Grahams are beset by a very real family curse. They each inherit the repressive tendencies of their parents, which causes their trauma to fester until it's out of control. As Annie explains in her eulogy, her mother was an emotionally distant person, unable to offer her the love or support that she needed. It's no surprise then that Annie inherited a complex, damaged idea of what it was to be a mother, which in turn instilled a deep fear of becoming one. She represses that fear, though, burying it in her unconscious so it can only manifest in her dreams.
I didn't feel like a mother.
Both her dreamed confession and her murderous sleepwalking are byproducts of these
They're burdened
unwanted,
by the weight
unthinkable
of what a
ideas.
mom is
Annie
supposed to be. And they
So
don't
she
fit that,
did this. This is a real scene. She did this while she was sleepwalking.
like trying to kill her
Yeah,
own kids.
she tried to kill him.
Annie remains unable to accept them as parts of herself. Even after she almost burns her children alive, she refuses to admit the severity of the situation.
And I was standing
They
there.
didn't take her kids away?
Some matches and an empty can of paint thinner.
She almost burned him alive.
And I woke myself up striking the match, which also.
Well, she was
woke Peter up, and he
sleepwalking
started
every
to
time.
scream.
To do so would mean acknowledging the part of her that wanted
Ooh.
to harm her children, shattering her already tenuous maternal identity.
I mean, I was just as shocked as he was. And it was impossible to convince them that it was just sleepwalking.
Unable to process her childhood traumas, she replicates them. She unwittingly neglects her children, even giving Charlie to Ellen in a desperate attempt to win the approval she still craves.
I didn't
Her giving her daughter to her
Mother.
Yeah.
Anywhere near me when I had my son, which is why I gave her my daughter, who she immediately stabbed her hooks into.
And in turn, she
So she didn't let her mother near
first
Peter,
one.
her son, her firstborn, but then she let her.
She felt so bad that
right.
she gave her the second one.
Oh.
hates kids who are just like her, repressing
Why
their
did the mother
traumatic
want her?
I don't know.
childhood
That's so weird.
experiences to preserve an image of normalcy. Peter and Charlie can't confront the idea that their mother tried to kill them, or in Charlie's case, functionally gave her away, any more than Annie can. So the whole family continues stumbling forward in willful ignorance. And this is where the freaky supernatural elements of the film become so important. The family's increasingly creepy experiences are symbolic of their dysfunction. As a result, they are blinded to all the signs that something sinister is brewing. Even as they each individually notice markings and apparitions, they are unable to communicate about them for fear that their sanity will be called into question.
That's the saddest part of the movie, is that they're all experiencing these like freaky incidences, but they're afraid to share them because they're afraid they'll be called crazy. Like their sanity will be called into question.
In fact, Ellen's pagan tendencies only go unnoticed in the first place because of how distant she and Annie are. When she dies, all her secrets are there to be discovered in a box in the attic, but no one finds them until it is too late. Fittingly, the fraught emotional associations Annie has with her mother ensures she won't do the work of sorting her belongings or her own emotions. This lays
So what they're saying is the whole like there's a twist with like demon possession and stuff, but it's like all of the answers were in the mother's belongings, but because of her detachment to her mother, like she was doomed to never find them until it was too late.
Well, she didn't want to know more about her mother.
Right.
Because it would just disappoint her more and more, whatever her image of a mother should have been.
Right.
The thing is, she's just like her mother, so her kids are also going to be expecting that, whatever that image of a mother is, and she's going to
right. So when I think
it.
they say the most damning thing that the mother passed on was detachment, that's what they mean. It's like she's so detached from her mother, she wouldn't even look through her stuff before, like, you know, to see like what's actually going on.
Well, sometimes some people don't have that. They don't have that history there, but if you went to a counselor, they can usually figure that out.
Yeah.
for Ellen's creepy friend Joan to enact the later stages of their plan. Sure, they have hundreds of years of demonic knowledge and mystical energy on their side, but their plan would be a non-starter if Annie had taken a brief flick through her mom's old things. The family's maladjustment makes them vulnerable in the first place. After drawing Annie in, Joan offers her a basic psychological defense: denial. If Annie can believe in the seance, then she doesn't have to really face the fact that Charlie is dead, doesn't have to reckon with her involvement in her death, or reconcile that with her fear of motherhood. So long as Charlie isn't dead, that can all remain buried.
So basically, what they're saying is this seance gives her an opportunity of denial, like if there's an explanation that Charlie is still around, then you don't have to deal with the fact that like you might be responsible for her going to that party, or you feel responsible for like.
But that's the thing;
death.
she needs to face that guilt. She
right?
isn't
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's what the seance is
she...
offering her, is an escape from that, or
instead
you don't have
of just facing it.
Yeah, and that's
like,
what
you're not responsible for that.
That's the trouble of being
it was like an accident, a freak accident.
That's the trouble of like being vulnerable. Is like people can take advantage of you, and she's being taken advantage of.
You didn't kill her, Annie. What? She isn't gone.
But the seance also serves a larger psychological purpose. Dr. Skinner talks about how feeling plugged into a meaningful cosmic system gives people a greater psychological balance and stability. And that's exactly what Joan's mysticism offers Annie. Her home life, her whole world has been shattered. And Joan offers her a way to piece it back together, to reconstruct her family. The supernatural forces at play naturally parallel the severe mental illness which runs in the family. Demonic possession and curses, after all, have historically been used as explanations for mental health problems that could not be otherwise understood. Ellen's husband and son both killed themselves as a result of schizophrenia or psychotic depression. Although her sons claim that she was putting voices inside him, raises the question of whether she was experimenting with demon raising even back then. Through these acts of violence, the family's self-destructive legacy is passed on to each member, dooming them to the same bloody fate as those who came before. Much of who we are is hereditary. It's why so many of us can probably relate to Annie and her family, feeling somewhat doomed to repeat the past and one day turn into our parents. Ultimately, the thing which locks the Graham family into their fate isn't ancient rites or mysterious ruins, but their own inability to process the trauma they have undergone. They suppress and suppress and suppress it, until it finally explodes. The violence which comes exploding out is filled with darkly poetic repetitions and reversals. Annie beheads herself in a gory imitation of Charlie's death. Her nighttime fantasies of burning a family member alive come true when Steve goes up in flames.
She burns him alive.
Repression and trauma lock them into a cycle, and their tortured family history seems doomed to repeat itself until they have all been destroyed.
Well, that's Hereditary. If you guys want to watch it, check it out. It's the scariest movie I've ever seen.
Don't worry. If you had bad parents, you could be awesome adults. It's a lie that bad parents make bad children.
That's true. Look at
You can overcome anything,
I don't know, Hitler's
including
kids.
your genes.
All right. Well, if you guys need to chill out, go check out our merch store. But if you don't have buds, we're your buds. Have a happy Halloween. Go check out some scary stuff. It's the season.
Let's have a Halloween.
If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe.